The thing about the American desert night is the silence. It's not a quiet silence, not a peaceful one. It's a heavy, pressing void that gets filled by the constant, droning hum of your own rig. That hum becomes the sound of your thoughts, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the only thing separating you from the absolute nothingness that stretches out beyond the headlights. My Peterbilt 379 was my world, a rolling metal island in a sea of blacktop and sagebrush. I'd been running the I-10 from Jacksonville to Los Angeles and back for more years than I cared to count. I knew every dip in the road outside of Tucson, every truck stop with decent coffee between El Paso and San Antonio, every speed trap in the blistering heat of Arizona. This particular run started like any other. A load of automotive parts from Florida needed to be in California in 48 hours. It was a tight schedule, but doable. The cargo was nothing special, the paperwork was in order, and the sky was a clear, unforgiving blue when I pulled out of the warehouse. The first day was a grind, eating up the miles through Alabama and Mississippi, watching the landscape slowly flatten and dry out as I pushed into Texas. The radio was my companion, crackling with static and the far-off voices of other night runners, sharing snippets of their lives over the airwaves. Stopped by the time I hit the true desert west of Van Horn. The sun was a dying ember on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and bruised orange. The heat of the day began to leach away, replaced by a chill that seeped through the glass of my windshield. I was ahead of schedule, but fatigue was starting to gnaw at the edges of my concentration. My eyes felt gritty, my back ached from the constant vibration, and the coffee from the last stop had long since lost its fight against the monotony. I started scanning for a place to pull over, just for an hour or two, to shake the cobwebs loose and maybe catch a power nap. The big, corporate truck stops were behind me. Out here, the places were fewer and farther between, more like lonely outposts than bustling hubs. My fuel gauge was dipping towards the red, adding a low thrum of anxiety to my tiredness. Running dry out here wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a genuine danger. That's when I saw it. A sign, old and weathered, the paint bleached pale by the sun. It was shaped like a teardrop, which was odd enough. The words on it were simple: last chance fuel and sundries to 5 miles. I'd run this route 100 times and never once noticed it. I figured it was a relic, a place that had closed down years ago, the sign just never taken down. But as I rolled closer, I saw a smaller, neon sign underneath it, flickering a weak, blood-red light, open. It was a gamble. These mom and pop places could be a lifesaver, selling homemade pies and strong coffee, or they could be a ripoff, selling watered-down fuel and bad advice. But the needle was kissing the empty line now. I didn't have much choice. I signaled, though there wasn't another soul on the road to see it, and guided my rig down the narrow, unmarked exit ramp. The pavement was cracked and littered with sand, the road leading into a darkness so deep it felt like driving into a cave. The place itself was exactly what you'd expect from a forgotten desert stop. A single, low-slung building with a dilapidated gas station canopy, under which stood 2 old-fashioned pumps. A single, bare bulb hung from the canopy, throwing a sickly yellow puddle of light on the ground. There were no other trucks, no cars, no signs of life at all. It was so quiet I could hear the asterisk tick asterisk of my engine cooling down. I sat there for a long minute, my hands still on the wheel, listening to the absolute silence and feeling a profound sense of unease settle in my gut. Something was off. The air felt too still, too heavy. I was about to throw the truck back in gear and take my chances on the last fumes in my tank when a figure emerged from the shadows of the building. He moved slowly, without urgency, a tall, gaunt man whose clothes hung off his frame like they were on a coat rack. He had a worn-out baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, but even in the poor light, I could see his face was a roadmap of deep wrinkles. He didn't wave or smile. He just stood there, under that single bulb, waiting, swallowing a dry lump in my throat. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, a physical pressure on my eardrums. I climbed down from the cab, the sound of my boots on the gravel unnaturally loud. The desert cold bit through my denim jacket. Evening, I grunted, my voice sounding rough and alien. The man just nodded. His eyes, when they flicked up to meet mine, were the palest blue I'd ever seen, like faded denim washed 1,000 times. They held no warmth, no curiosity. They were just observing. Need fuel? He asked. His voice was a dry rasp, like sandpaper on old wood. Yeah, I said, gesturing with my thumb back at my rig. Diesel, fill up. He gave another slow, deliberate nod and shuffled over to the pump. It was an ancient model, the kind with a mechanical dial and numbers that clicked over with a loud, physical asterisk thunk asterisk. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of a lifetime of doing this exact thing in this exact place. As he lifted the nozzle and opened my tank, I noticed his hands. Long, bony fingers, but they handled the heavy hose with a strange, effortless grace. I leaned against the front fender of my truck, trying to look casual. "Quiet night," I offered, attempting to break the eerie stillness. "Always is," he rasped without looking at me. "This is a quiet place." The pump began to click and hum, but it wasn't the usual sound of liquid flowing. It was softer, a faint, gurgling whisper. I shook my head, blaming it on my fatigue. I watched the numbers on the dial spin, but my gaze kept drifting back to the building. Through the grimy window, I could see a small, dimly lit interior. A few shelves with dusty cans, an old cooler, and a counter. No television, no music, just silence. "You from around here?" I asked, another feeble attempt at conversation. "This is my place," he said, his answer ending the line of questioning as definitely as a slamming door. He finished pumping and carefully hung the nozzle back on its cradle. The asterisk thunk asterisk of the final number on the dial was startlingly loud. "That'll be $2.50. I did a double take. $2.50. For a full tank? You mean $2.50 plus tax?" That was less than half what it should have cost. $2.50, he repeated, his pale eyes fixed on me. Cash. A warning bell was clanging in the back of my mind. This was wrong. The price was wrong. The place was wrong. The man was wrong. But I was tired, and my wallet was happy. I fumbled out the cash and handed it over. His fingers were ice cold when they brushed against mine, and a shiver ran down my spine. He took the money, folded it once, and tucked it into the pocket of his jeans. "You have a safe drive," he said, his tone flat and final. He turned and walked back towards the building, melting into the shadows from which he came without another word. I stood there for a moment, alone again under the vast, star-dusted sky, feeling more unsettled than I had before I stopped. I climbed back into the cab, the familiar environment doing little to comfort me. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I pulled out of that lonely puddle of light and back onto the dark ribbon of the highway, eager to put miles between me and that place. For the first 20 miles, I was tense, waiting for the truck to sputter and die, convinced the cheap fuel was just water or some other junk that would clog my filters and leave me stranded. But it didn't. In fact, the engine sounded different, smoother. The usual low grumble was quieter, replaced by a softer, almost melodic hum. The power felt instantaneous. When I pressed the accelerator, the Peterbilt surged forward with a responsiveness I hadn't felt since it was fresh off the lot. It was incredible. I relaxed into my seat, the unease from the gas station slowly fading, replaced by a sense of exhilaration. Whatever that guy was selling, it was premium stuff. I cracked open the window, letting the cold desert air whip through the cab, and settled in for the long haul. The white lines in the road began to blur together as I picked up speed. I felt alert, focused, more alive than I had in years. This was what driving was supposed to feel like. It was about an hour into the drive, the station a distant memory swallowed by the night, when I first heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind, a high-pitched keen whistling through a loose seal in the window. I rolled it up. The sound persisted. It was faint, so faint it was almost at the edge of hearing, woven into the fabric of the engine's new, smooth hum. I turned off the radio, listening intently. It wasn't the wind. It was a voice, or rather, the ghost of a voice. A soft, mournful sigh that rose and fell with the RPMs. A chill, completely separate from the desert cold, traced a path down my back. I told myself I was imagining it. Too many hours alone, too much coffee, not enough sleep. My mind was playing tricks on me. I turned the radio back on, blasting a classic rock station to drown it out. But the sound was persistent. It was there, underneath the guitars and drums, a thread of sorrow running through the music. I couldn't make out words, but I could feel the emotion behind it, a profound, bottomless sadness. It was the sound of pure loss. I found my grip tightening on the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. This wasn't right. Engines don't sound like this. They don't weep. I tried to rationalize it. A harmonic vibration from a new belt. A problem with the turbo. But I'd been driving this rig for a decade. I knew every squeak and rattle. This was alien. This was inside the engine itself. My eyes flicked to the fuel gauge. The tank was still 3/4 full. I was stuck with it. The initial exhilaration I'd felt now seemed grotesque. This performance, this smooth, powerful ride, had a price, and I was just beginning to understand that I was listening to it. I pushed on, the whispery lament a constant, unwelcome passenger in my cab. The landscape outside was a monochrome of shadows under the sliver of a moon. The Joshua trees stood like skeletal sentinels, watching me pass. I felt exposed, as if the very darkness was aware of me, of the cargo of sorrow I was carrying in my fuel tanks. The feeling of being alone was no longer just solitude. It was isolation. I was the only living soul for miles, accompanied only by the haunted song of my own machine. The whisper began to change. It was no longer just a formless sigh. It started to differentiate. I could hear them now, multiple voices, layered over one another. A woman's soft, broken weeping. A man's low, guttural sob of despair. The high, terrified whimper of a child. They were faint, like a radio station from another continent, but they were unmistakable. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was sweating despite the cold, and then the headlights began to play tricks on me. At the very edge of their reach, in the periphery where the light bled into the darkness, I started seeing things. Shadows that moved with purpose. I'd catch a glimpse of a figure standing by the side of the road, arm outstretched, only for it to be gone when I looked directly at it. A shimmering, translucent shape of a car would seem to veer across the road in front of me, causing me to slam on the brakes for a phantom. I was gripping the wheel so hard my arms were starting to ache. "It's not real," I whispered to myself, the sound of my own voice a small comfort against the spectral chorus under my hood. "You're tired. You're hallucinating." But the logic felt flimsy, a paper shield against a very real and growing terror. A particularly sharp sob, clear and close, echoed from the engine. At that exact moment, a vision bloomed in my mind's eye, vivid and brutal. I wasn't just hearing it. I was seeing it. A man in a suit, kneeling on the shoulder of this very highway, his hands tearing at his hair as he watched the taillights of a car disappear into the distance, taking his entire life with it. The crushing weight of his regret was a physical blow to my chest. I gasped, my vision swimming. Another voice, a young woman's, rose in a keen of grief. The vision shifted, a wedding ring, spinning and falling into the dust. A suitcase, left open and empty in a motel room. The taste of salt, like tears, filled my mouth. I was feeling their losses, their heartbreaks, as if they were my own. The loneliness, the betrayal, the sheer, utter devastation of having everything you care about ripped away. I realized then what the gaunt man had sold me. Fuel from tears. It wasn't just a brand name. It was the truth. This wasn't petroleum. This was liquefied sorrow. The essence of human suffering, distilled from those who had lost everything on this long, lonely road. And I was burning it. I was using their pain to power my truck. And in doing so, I was giving their anguish a voice. Their memories, their final, most painful moments, were being played back through the machinery of my engine. A fresh wave of terror washed over me, so potent it made me nauseous. I wasn't just transporting parts. I was a hearse carrying the ghosts of the broken. The smooth ride, the incredible power was the euphoria of their final, desperate release, and I was a parasite, feeding on it. I had to get this poison out of my tank. I started looking for a place to pull over, to siphon it out, to do anything to stop this nightmare. But I was in the middle of the desert, and the next exit was miles away. I was trapped in a rolling tomb, surrounded by the echoes of the damned. The individual voices began to coalesce, their separate tragedies weaving together into a single, unified dirge. The sound was no longer just in the engine. It seemed to fill the cab, thick and cloying like fog. The air grew cold, so cold I could see my own breath pluming in the green glow of the dashboard lights. The heater was on full blast, but it did nothing against this supernatural chill. The visions became more intense, more personal. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was a participant. One moment, I felt the searing pain of a father who had lost his family in a crash. The steering wheel of his memory morphing into my own. The texture of the leather suddenly feeling like his, stained with his tears. The next, I was a young man, my pockets empty, staring at a final notice bill. The feeling of hopelessness so profound it was a physical ache in my bones. "Leave me alone." I screamed into the noise, my voice cracking with fear and desperation. But the chorus of the lost only grew louder, as if my recognition had given them strength. The smooth purr of the engine was now undeniably a cacophony of sobs, a symphony of anguish playing just for me. My truck, my sanctuary, my home for all these years, had become a haunted object. Every gear shift, every press of the pedal, felt like a violation. I was desecrating their memories with every mile I gained. The power I had marveled at now felt obscene. A blasphemous energy born from the worst moments of human lives. I saw them all now. Not as fleeting shadows, but as translucent figures sitting in my passenger seat. Standing behind me in the sleeper berth, their faces contorted in eternal grief. They were men, women, even a small child clutching a tattered teddy bear. They didn't look at me with anger, but with a deep, infinite sadness that was far, far worse. It was an accusatory pity, as if they felt sorry for me for being the one who had to carry this burden. The road ahead seemed to warp. The yellow dividing line in the center appeared to be drawn in tears, shimmering and liquid. The asphalt itself looked like a river of black oil, or perhaps of dried blood. I was losing my grip on reality, the line between the physical world and this spiritual hellscape blurring into nothingness. I was no longer just a trucker on a delivery run. I was the ferryman on the river Styx, and my cargo was the souls of the departed. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I would drive myself mad. I had to get off this road. I had to find a way to purge this cursed fuel from my system. Up ahead, I saw the faint, welcome glow of lights. A rest area. It was a small, lonely square of pavement with a few picnic tables and a restroom building, but it was a landmark of the real world. A place to stop, to ground myself. With a surge of desperate hope, I signaled and guided my weeping truck onto the off-ramp. I pulled into the farthest, darkest corner of the rest area, away from the two other trucks that were parked there. Their engines were silent, their cabs dark. The drivers were asleep, blissfully unaware of the rolling nightmare that had just pulled in beside them. I killed my engine, and the sudden silence was as shocking as a gunshot. For a long time, I just sat there, trembling, my forehead resting against the cool steering wheel. The absence of the engine's mournful wail was a relief so profound it felt like a physical weight had been lifted. The only sounds were the normal, real-world sounds of the desert night. The chirping of crickets, the faint sigh of the wind. The ghosts were gone. The cold in the cab began to slowly recede. I climbed out of the truck, my legs shaky, and leaned against the warm metal of the door, sucking in deep, ragged breaths of clean, cold air. It tasted of dust and sagebrush. It tasted real. I looked up at the sky, at the impossible sprawl of stars, and tried to anchor myself to their cold, constant light. For a few precious minutes, I felt almost normal. The horror of the last few hours felt like a bad dream, something my tired mind had concocted. I walked towards the restroom, the gravel crunching loudly under my boots. The sound was mundane, comforting. Inside the brightly lit, sterile room, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked old. My eyes were sunken, with dark circles underneath them. I looked like a man who had seen a ghost, or 100 of them. The rational part of my brain tried to reassert control. Asterisk, you fell asleep at the wheel, asterisk, it said. Asterisk, this was all a hypnagogic hallucination. A waking dream. The fuel is just fuel. That station was just a strange place with a cheap, eccentric owner. Asterisk, the explanation was tempting, a lifeline back to sanity. I wanted to believe it more than anything. But as I stood there, clinging to that thought, I heard a faint sound from outside. A soft, rhythmic asterisk drip. Drip, drip. Asterisk, my blood ran cold. I walked slowly back out into the night and moved towards the front of my truck. There, on the ground beneath the fuel tank, was a small, dark puddle. I knelt down and touched a finger to it. It was clear, like water, but thicker. I brought my finger to my nose. There was no smell of diesel, nothing but a faint, clean, saline scent. It was a tear. My truck was crying. All the hope I had managed to scrape together shattered in that instant. It wasn't a dream. It was all real. The fuel was weeping, leaking the condensed sorrow it held. I looked back at my rig, my beautiful, trusted Peterbilt, and now I saw it for what it had become, a vessel, a prison for trapped emotions. I couldn't finish the run to California. I couldn't drive another mile with this inside me. I had to go back. I had to go back to that godforsaken station and confront the gaunt man. He had done this to me. He had to have an answer. He had to take this curse back. The drive back was the longest of my life. I drove slow, my knuckles white on the wheel, the engine's lament feeling louder and more accusatory than ever, as if the spirits knew I was returning to their point of origin. The sun was beginning to lighten the eastern horizon, casting the desert in a pale, sickly gray light. The shapes of the cacti looked like tortured souls reaching for a salvation that would never come. I found the exit with a sense of grim inevitability. The teardrop sign looked even more sinister in the dawn's half-light. I guided my truck down the cracked ramp, the sound of the weeping engine echoing off the barren hills. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pulled right up to the same pump and shut the engine down. The ensuing silence was heavy with expectation. The gaunt man emerged from the building just as he had before, moving with the same slow, deliberate pace. He didn't seem surprised to see me. He stopped under the canopy, his pale eyes regarding me, my truck, the small, still damp patch of tears on the ground beneath it. "What did you do to me?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. "What the hell is in that fuel?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze seeming to look right through me. "I told you," he rasped finally. "It's fuel. It makes your truck run. It whispers." I shouted, taking a step towards him. "It cries," I saw. I felt. People. Their pain. "What is it?" He sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "This road. It sees a lot of sorrow. People leave their lives behind out here. They lose their families, their money, their hope. They pour their grief onto the asphalt. It soaks in." He gestured vaguely towards the highway. "I just collect it, refine it. It's the purest energy there is. The energy of a broken heart. Your burning souls." I yelled, pointing a shaking finger at my fuel tank. "No," he said. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not malice, but a deep, ancient weariness. Not souls, just what's left behind. The echo. The pain has to go somewhere. Most of it just fades, but some is strong enough to be used. "I don't want it," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Get it out. I'll pay you double. Just get this poison out of my truck." He shook his head slowly. "Can't. Once it's in, it's in. You have to burn it. All of it. That's the deal." I felt a cold dread wash over me. "What happens if I don't?" He looked at me, and his faded eyes were full of a pity that was more terrifying than any threat. "Then it stays with you. The whispers become voices. The voices become passengers. They'll look for a new home when the fuel is gone. They'll think your truck is theirs. They'll think your life is theirs." The horror of his meaning sank in. I was the host now. I had invited them in. The only way to be rid of them was to finish the journey, to burn every last drop of their sorrow. I looked from his impassive face to my truck, which sat silent for now, but I knew the moment I started the engine, the chorus would begin again. I had no choice. I was damned if I did, and damned if I didn't. I had to carry this grief to its final destination. Without another word, I turned and walked back to my cab on unsteady legs. I climbed in, the leather seat feeling like a slab in a morgue. I started the engine. The weeping began immediately, a soft, resigned sob that seemed to fill the entire world. I pulled back onto the highway, heading west, towards Los Angeles. The ride was smoother than ever, the power unbelievable. But I felt every single mile of it, each one a turn of the screw, a note in the endless funeral dirge playing just for me. I was no longer just a driver. I was a pallbearer, and my cargo of tears was the heaviest load I would ever carry.